No, that's the symphony. That's the stellar. The other stuff. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Saxophone and trombone. Except for the Christmas concert. when I bring the baritone saxophone. Now there's a definitely right there. See, when I say that, folks, I was in the Marine Corps. People assume things. And the fact is, I was in the Marine Corps band. However, what most people don't realize, before you become a bandsman, you become an infantryman. Yeah. It was a, it was like that. It was funny with other individuals that were going through the same process with me. They were like, this is like, they didn't tell us this. Well, you're in now. Yeah. I highly recommend you complete the course.
So when you sign up, you can say you want to be in the band?
Well, today, I would say, today to do that, you have to have a fine arts degree in music. And back in 1979, not so much.
Okay.
But you do try out, and then you have a contract that says one thing: you must complete Marine Corps recruit training, depot training, and infantry training school, and then you will be a senator.
So there's no guarantee when you go.
There's no. It's kind of like that whole oxymoron about military intelligence. Okay. All right. We got seven, right?
I do, yeah.
You ready? Okay. Mic's on.
Mic's on.
Ready? Okay, I'd like to call to order this meeting of Genoa Township Zoning Commission. Today's date, October 12th. It's not 2013, it's 2020.
Oh, yes, 2021.
The time is 7 p.m. The agenda tonight, first item on the agenda is the Maxtown Property 169 LLC. Then the other item on the agenda is the zoning text amendment. This will be the first meeting for that. Staff present. Joe, can you go roll call?
Roll call, Mr. Leff. Here. Mr. Moore. Mr. Antonetz.
Here.
Ms. Walsh.
Present.
Mr. Welch.
Here.
Mr. Bishop. Here. And Mr. Welty did tell me that he was not going to be able to attend this evening.
Also for the record with us is Joe Schaefer, Director of Development and Zoning, and Paul Benson, Deputy Zoning Inspector. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from September 13th, 2021. Anybody had to review, questions, concerns, revisions? I take it you don't have any. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Roll.
I was, sir.
Sarah's second.
Okay, roll call, Mr. Leff. Yes. Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Ms. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Welch.
Yes.
Mr. Antonetz.
Abstain. Okay, do I need to read this into the record, or do I go ahead and recuse myself?
I would go ahead and recuse yourself, and then Mr. Leff will read it as acting chair.
Okay. At this moment in the meeting, to avoid any conflict of interest, I'm going to recuse myself and hand the reins over to our Vice Chair, David Leff. I would just ask is once this portion of the public meeting's over, I'm going to be in the back. I'll rejoin the meeting.
Yep. Yeah, if you want to go ahead. I mean, you can sit there, I guess, or you can just go ahead and sit in his spot. It'd be easier. Plus, everyone can see you.
Enjoy it.
Yeah. Remember to come get you. Yes.
Maybe. The time is now 7:04. In order to have a full commission, Mr. Bishop, who sat during the August 8th meeting, will again sit as a voting member in place of Mr. Antonetz. For continuity, Mr. Bishop, who was absent from the September 13th meeting, has listened to the recording of the previous meeting. Mr. Bishop, for the record, do you testify that you have listened to a recording of the September 13th hearing?
Yes.
Ms. Mandrell, are you comfortable with Mr. Bishop sitting as a voting member without listening to the prior, oh, no, sorry, that's
Okay,
only
you
if
don't
he
need to
says
read
no.
that.
There we go. We're good.
I listen.
You listen. All right, now calling the hearing order at 7:05 PM. And ask that, let's see. Read the legal notice. All right, Maxtown Property 169 LLC requesting approval of a rezoning and preliminary development plan to construct a retail business on approximately 0.862 acres at parcel number 317-341-050-03000, a vacant lot currently zoned rural residential, RR, seeking rezoning to planned commercial district, PCD, zoning case number 2021-03, continued from September 13th, 2021. Anyone who's willing to speak, please rise. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God. The following exhibits were revised or added to the September 13th, 2021 exhibit list. Exhibit E is the revised application and plans received September 24th, 2021. Exhibit J, staff technical review dated October 5th of 2021 for October 12th, 2021. Exhibit K, staff memo dated October 5th, 2021 for October 12th, 2021. And Exhibit M, all public comments received between July 6th, 2021 and October 12th, 2021. Mr. Schaefer, we'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So before you have the updated memorandum and staff technical review. Just like the last meeting, I'm going to only discuss the changes, and I'm going to try to go through them as quickly as possible. So on page 1 of the memorandum, I just updated the description of the surroundings. I'm not really going to go into that in depth. I'll leave that as presented because we're all pretty familiar with the surroundings of the property at this point. Regarding utilities, on page 2 of the memorandum, I did note that final approvals for the sewer waste connections are not required at this stage of the process. Section 270302.e of the zoning resolution only requires that said letters confirm availability of such services, and as testified at the last meeting, the applicant has provided letters from both regional sewer and public health that indicate that public sanitary sewer or septic could be provided for on this site. So I guess just elaborate on that briefly. If you recall at the last meeting, the applicant presented both options. They do have a preference. In my discussions with them, it doesn't sound like they want to commit to an option at this stage, primarily due to the fact that should they go to final engineering and discover stuff out that they don't know now, I believe, and that was the testimony at the last meeting, if I recall correctly, that essentially they don't want to tell you one thing, go to final engineering, realize that they have to do another thing, and then come back at final and tell you, oops, sorry. So it sounds like their preference is to leave it somewhat open-ended and then finalize it with you upon submission of a final development application. Obviously, that would be contingent upon this application being approved. Regarding the easements that we were talking about, should the public sanitary option be selected, I did copy and paste the verbiage from the plat for Northern Lake Section 1 regarding the easement in question, and it reads, easements are reserved in, over, and under areas designated on this plat as easement or drainage easement for the construction, operation, and maintenance of all public and quasi-public utilities above and beneath the surface of the ground, and where necessary are for the construction, operation, and maintenance of service connections to all adjacent lots and lands for stormwater drainage. So just wanted to get that easement on the record since I mentioned it at the last meeting. Again, going back to sewer and utilities, the zoning resolution doesn't have a requirement that they pick an option this evening. I think they've basically demonstrated that both options are feasible or allowable under the county regulations. Moving on, I did note in here that obviously future development that's parcel, be it under current residential zoning or under the proposed commercial zoning, would most likely require either the installation of a septic system or public sanitary sewer connection. So really, this rezoning, while bringing the conversation up, doesn't really change the fact that even if this was a zoning state as is and someone wanted to build a house here, they'd be facing the exact same decision. Moving on, down in the landscaping.
Question, and I think
Yes, sir.
just from memory and the the density of the system would be about relative to a residential?
I'll let Ms. Mandrell answer that. I want to say that was her testimony during one of the prior meetings, but I'll let her speak to
Thank you.
that. I did update some of the sections in the landscaping portion of the memo on page 3 because the applicant actually changed some of their landscaping plans, particularly on the west side, along the west property line. They sort of flip-flopped where the trees and fence were going to go on the plan, so Mr. Benson's going to pull it up here. So you can now see that the trees that were proposed towards the southern end of the property on the western lot line are now up in the northern end in the northwestern corner, so they match the trees that are proposed along the northern property line, and then the fence that was proposed along that section has been moved further south. Staff doesn't have an issue with this, and if anything, actually, this proposal results in actually better compliance than what the previous iteration did, because if you require the previous iteration for last month, the trees that they had proposed were deciduous in nature and didn't meet the evergreen standard. So now that they're going to the evergreen plantings, that essentially addresses that issue and eliminates any need for a divergence on that front. Also, we spoke at the last meeting, I had wanted some additional screening along that western property line a little further south, and then the applicant testified that they're reserving that area at essentially their request of Westerville, because should the property to the west ever develop, Westerville's preference would be that that driveway be shared, so that's where the connection to the property to the west would be provided. So obviously, I think it meets the spirit and intent of the resolution, the screening as is, knowing that that little area of that parking lot there is being reserved for that future connection. So I don't have any compliance concerns there. I think they're meeting the code now. The front parking lot landscaping has been modified there. It will be screened from Maxtown Road via a 3-foot mound planted with evergreen shrubs that are 2+ feet in height on top. So this design also complies with the requirements of the zoning resolution and eliminates any non-compliance issues there and no longer a need for a potential divergence.
Joe?
Yes, sir.
Quick question, because listening, the issue was the 5.5 feet in the front.
Yes.
So how does this now justify this?
The mound plus the trees. The mound
plus the
counts
trees
for
is
3
fine.
feet.
All right, I
The
got
trees
it.
will actually have to be 2.5 feet, but they were close enough. They said 2 to 3. At this stage in the game, I feel like they've demonstrated the intent to comply.
Gotcha.
We can nail down the final height of those trees during final.
Got it. Thank
Is
you.
there going to be any line of sight issues?
I don't believe so, because the road doesn't exactly start just where that front property line is. There's still going to be more, essentially, grass beyond those plantings before you actually get to the curb where the cars are going to be waiting to look left and right.
Chip, I asked that too, and I think the answer was that there's only one ingress and egress driveway to get in and out, and that's unfettered. But I had the same question as well. I mean, just in being able to see the ability to get on, Maxtown/Polaris Parkway there. But it sounds like that was
Can't
addressed.
see the note on the drawing there, right above where it says Maxtown Road, what that note says, whether that's the curb or if that's center line.
If it's to scale, it's like 15 feet.
So the edge of pavement is right above where it says Maxtown Road on that drawing. So you can see from that line back is all open grass space. And that's probably at least a car, that's a car length's worth of, if not more, from that edge of pavement to,
Where it says edge of pavement is the edge of the road, not the right-of-way, the dash line?
yeah, probably. That's how I read it. Westerville's probably asking for the right-of-way for utilities, any expansion of the road, turn lanes, things of that nature.
It's a heck of a lot more than 15 feet.
Drainage.
Yeah, it's probably 5 feet.
Yeah. Westerville will also have to review the plans on their end, so if they feel like there's a line of sight issue and they make the applicant change the plans, again, that's why we have the final application process, so they can come back and make any modifications if something were to happen. That's an excellent question, though. Lot coverage, they have corrected the lot coverage calculations, now using the correct acreage, so I no longer have a concern with that. A conceptual lighting plan was submitted demonstrating general compliance. They're essentially using spillover lighting from the building-mounted lighting to illuminate the parking lot, which I think is really the ideal solution here because it means they don't have to put up standalone light posts now for the neighbors. That's That's a good thing and still meets the requirements of the code to light the parking lot. The applicant did voluntarily remove all information pertaining to signage from the plans. If they do end up deciding they want signage, they can include all that material again at the final submission, should we get to that standpoint. So at this point, under this application, there's no signage on the plans. I imagine they'll probably revisit that topic at final again, should we get there, but the application now currently, as it stands, proposes no signage whatsoever on the site.
No ground mount, no building.
Correct, yeah, the monument sign is out, off the drawings.
We'll get to it, sorry.
As far as I read the drawings, nothing's there. The exhibit was pulled out of the list, it's erased from the drawings, so that's my understanding. Again, I'm assuming they will eventually want signage. I think they've just decided they'll address that at final as opposed to this stage of the game. I updated the divergence request just to update the number of trees that are being planted. They now have 13 additional evergreen trees along the eastern border to supplement the 6 existing trees, and now we're proposing 9 evergreen trees along the western property line, as I previously noted. Also, the revision to the landscaping plan no longer necessitates a de facto divergence to section 2003-02 as part of this request because, again, they're now compliant in that aspect. Moving along to probably the most substantial part of the memorandum revision. So a concern about spot zoning was raised during the prior meeting regarding this application. I did a little bit of research on this just for the zoning commissions, for informational purposes for the commission. So the following is an excerpt from section 841 of Ohio Planning and Zoning Law 2017 by Meck and Perlman regarding the topic of spot zoning. It's very important for me to note that this excerpt contains non-legal opinions of the authors. It is only intended to be informative. It should not be considered legal advice. I will say, though, this is pretty much my handy-dandy, like, how does zoning and planning work in the state of Ohio reference book when I have questions about these types of things. So, and I quote, many people think that a rezoning of a single parcel of land constitutes spot zoning and is unconstitutional. This is incorrect. Spot zoning is simply a phrase used to conclude that a rezoning is unconstitutional for specified reasons. Rezoning a single parcel or a small area is not unconstitutional per se. Rezoning a small area in a discriminatory or unreasonable manner is. The same, however, is true of the rezoning of many parcels of large areas. Courts, however, may refer to the rezoning of a single parcel as spot zoning, and this causes confusion. It is better to ignore the issue of how many parcels are involved. The ultimate question with one parcel, as with many, ought to be whether the ordinance is reasonable and whether it is in accordance with a comprehensive plan. If it is not, it may be left to the whim and caprice of the officials, which often results in the dreaded spot zoning. The concern is to assure that a purchaser of property can determine in advance the use to which the property can be put and that the code provides guidance to a zoning board so its decisions are not based on whim and caprice. Spot zoning involves an unlawful departure from a community zoning ordinance. The Ohio Supreme Court defines spot zoning as the singling out of a lot or small area for discriminatory or different treatment from that accorded surrounding land which is similar in character. An allegation of spot zoning is generally the result of a request to rezone a parcel of land to a more intense land use classification. To sustain a piecemeal change from the zoning ordinance, the challenger must argue that a rational relationship exists between the proposed zoning ordinance or amendments and the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. Rezoning of any single parcel, like the rezoning of numerous parcels at the same time, is only justified when it is done in furtherance of a general plan, properly adopted for and designed to serve the best interests of the community as a whole, not for the benefit of a particular individual or group, end quotation. So back to my commentary. As noted in item 3A above of this memorandum, rezoning the subject parcel above would be, in staff's professional opinion, in accordance with the comprehensive plan and would also seem to be, quote, in furtherance of a general plan adopted for and designed to serve the best interests of the community as a whole. And I say that because the comprehensive plan recommends this parcel and the parcel to the west for commercial zoning. The granting divergences for aspects of a proposal which are not compliant is lawful pursuant to section 2707 of the Genoa Township Zoning Resolution. While the properties to the east and north are zoned residential, properties to the south are zoned or plan to be zoned non-residential, either industrial or commercial, according to the township's official zoning map. The township's 2019 comprehensive plan and the official zoning map and/or the official zoning map of the city of Westerville. Some of the properties I'm referencing are in Genoa, some of them are in Westerville. The subject proposal would be consistent with other adjacent non-residential land uses which are either existing or planned. These include Sonova and Cardinal Self-Storage to the south and the two properties to the west, one of which is already zoned planned commercial district, and the other, which like this parcel is also recommended to be rezoned to commercial in the township's comprehensive plan, as I just said. The applicant also did provide a letter from the neighbor immediately to the west in support of their rezoning request. So moving on to the tech review, as you can see, the vast majority of the comments have been addressed. Pretty much almost all of the ones that we went through in detail at the last meeting have been addressed. In fact, I believe there was only one comment that wasn't addressed, and I find it to be very minor and not sort of relatively inconsequential. Essentially, in the development text, there was the section they were responding to each of the divergence review section standards, and they still are missing a response to one of those items. But you've had 3 hearings on this. I think it's clear that the spirit and intent of those items has been discussed, and you will discuss them as part of your review process once your discussion's over, as scripted out. So I have really no concerns with this application moving forward with that one outstanding comment remaining. I think it's something that can be easily dealt with between now and the board review. So with that, Mr. Chairman, if you do not have any questions for me, at this moment, I'm just going to turn it back over to you.
Good. Joe, we'll let you talk.
Pat Mantrell, 169 North Otterbein, Westerville. I apologize for Joni not being here. She had a meeting tonight that she couldn't get out of, so I'm sorry about that. I really don't have a presentation or anything because everything we presented is what was given to you as far as in your packet. So there wasn't anything I felt like I needed to really expound on or anything. So I want you to know that we spent a lot of time in the 2 weeks before our submission on September 24th going through everything, and I think that's why the review has a lot of resolved issues on it. So I feel comfortable that we've addressed all the coding and we're to code for everything that we need to be. Sans Decker went through everything also from top to bottom and changed measurements and numbers and omissions and added everything. So I feel like that added to our submission to be complete. So really at this time, we're kind of ready to move forward. I'd be more than happy to talk about any subjects that you want to talk about and any questions you have, but I really don't have anything new to present to you this time that we didn't submit to Joe on September 24th.
You want to comment on the sign?
Yes, so we ran into a timing issue with that. We want to keep the sign exactly as it is and all that, but the sign company couldn't give us the time to draw it up and the parameters, and I didn't want to present a sign if the measurements weren't right. So we definitely are going to have a sign, and it'll probably look the same. It was a timing issue. They couldn't get to us by September 24th. So it was decided between myself and Sans Decker that we should just kind of wait and do it if it goes to final planning or zoning.
Okay. You're comfortable with the process? You got everything taken care of? There's nothing else lingering?
Not that I know of, no.
Okay.
So,
Board comments, questions?
No, I have none.
I think we've run through this thing enough times at this point to see where we need to go. Chip, would you like to do your
Divergence review?
divergence duty?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair, I would, thank you. It is 7:24 PM. The commission reviewed each divergent request against the standards set forth within Section 2707 of the Township Zoning Resolution to determine if such a request is warranted. Pursuant to Section 2707.05, divergence requests shall demonstrate how granting the request will advance public interests and general purposes of this zoning resolution by promoting or not having an adverse impact on one or more of the following purposes. And Mr. Chair, I would propose that B, C, D, E, and F are applicable. B being the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the present and future inhabitants of Genoa Township. C, the quality of life within Genoa Township through the protection of the total environment, the prevention of nuisances and hazards, and the provision of adequate light, air, and convenient access to property. D, the assurance of the compatibility of land uses which are either adjacent or in proximity to each other. E, the orderly development of all lands within the township to its appropriate use. And F, the most appropriate use of land to facilitate and provide adequate public and private improvements. Per section 2707.07, unless a deviation from development standards is specifically approved as a divergence, the same shall be complied with. So based on what has been presented to us, number one, the first divergence being from section 1203.01 to allow rezoning to planned commercial development, PC planned commercial, is that correct? On a parcel that is under 5 acre minimum and not adjacent to another parcel zoned PCD. I again believe that B, C, D, E, and F of the divergent justifications apply in this situation. Number two, a divergence from section 1203.03A and 1203.03.B to reduce the 75-foot green strip and screening setback from adjacent residential lot lines. I believe that D, E, and F would apply in that situation. Divergence number three, a divergence from section 1203.09 to reduce the 75-foot parking lot setback from the street right-of-way. I also would suggest that D, E, and F of our divergent basis apply in that situation. And then finally, number four, divergence from section 1208.01 to reduce the 100-foot building setback from any district boundary line and street right-of-way. Again, finding that D, E, and F apply in that situation.
Very good, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Any comments or questions with divergences? Okay, do I have a motion? Before we do that, is there anything else, Joe, that we need to specify in the reading other than what you have script-wise?
No, just a reminder that typically we make two motions, one related to the rezoning request itself and another related to the preliminary development plan. And all your options should be laid out there for you.
So I can start with the rezoning if you'd like, Mr. Chair.
Read away.
I will move to recommend approval of the following to the Genoa Township Board of Trustees, the subject zoning map amendment, also known as rezoning application, including all plans and materials submitted by Maxtown Property 169 LLC to rezone approximately 0.862 acres of property located at parcel number 317-341-050-03000 from rural residential to planned commercial district, also known as J.C. Manny Company, Zoning Commission case number 2021-03, incorporating exhibits A through M. I further move to recommend approval of the following divergences from the Genoa Township zoning resolution. Stand by. Joe, you only have one of the four here.
Yeah, the rest get covered under the.
Okay. Divergence from section 1203.01 to allow rezoning to PCD, planned commercial development, or district, sorry, on a parcel that is under 5 acre minimum and not adjacent to another parcel zoned planned commercial development district. This motion to recommend approval of the subject zoning map amendment application, which shall be subject to sections 2704.18 through 2704.23 of the Genoa Township zoning resolution, is based on the following findings of fact and conclusions. Said amendment is found to be consistent with the Genoa Township comprehensive plan pursuant to section 108 of the Genoa Township zoning resolution.
second Mr. Walsh's motion.
Thank you. Mr. Schaefer, roll call?
Roll call, Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Walsh,
Yes.
Mr. Welch,
Yes.
Mr. Leff.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Passes. Thank you. All right. Do I have a motion for the development plan?
Sure, okay.
You're doing that.
I'll move to recommend approval of the following to the Genoa Township Board of Trustees, the subject preliminary development plan incorporated within the subject zoning map amendment application, including all plans and materials submitted by Maxtown Property 169 LLC to construct a retail business on approximately 0.862 acres of property located at parcel number 317-341-050-03000, currently zoned rural residential and pending rezoning to planned commercial district, also known as J.C. Manny Company zoning commission case number 2021-03, incorporating exhibits A through M and any commitments made by the applicant during this hearing, and no commitments have been made by the applicant. I further move to recommend approval of the following divergences from the Genoa Township zoning resolution, which shall be in addition to those granted during the rezoning. Number one, divergence from section 1203.01 to allow rezoning to planned commercial district on a parcel that is under 5-acre minimum and not subject to another parcel zoned PCD as already granted per the approved rezoning. Number two, divergence from section 1203.03.A and 1203.03.B to reduce the 75-foot green strip and screening setback from adjacent residential lot lines. Number three, divergence from section 1203.09 to reduce the 75-foot parking lot setback from the street right-of-way. And number four, divergence from section 1208.01 to reduce the 100-foot building setback from any district boundary line and street right-of-way. This motion to recommend approval of the subject preliminary development plan incorporated within the zoning map amendment application, which shall be subject to sections 2704.18 through 2704.23 of the Genoa Township zoning resolution, is based on the following findings of fact and conclusions. And I reiterate that these divergences fall under the findings that the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the present and future inhabitants of Genoa Township, the quality of life within Genoa Township through the protection of the total environment, the prevention of nuisances and hazards, and the provision of adequate light, air, and convenient access to property, the assurance of the compatibility of land uses which are either adjacent or in proximity to each other, the orderly development of all lands within the township to its appropriate use, and the most appropriate use of land to facilitate and provide adequate public and private improvements. That's it.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll, Mr. Schaefer.
Roll call, Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Walsh,
Yes.
Mr. Welch,
Yes.
Mr. Leff.
Yes. Motion carries. At 7:33, that concludes this portion of the hearing. Thank you very much. We will take a 5-minute recess so we can get Mr. Antonetts back in. Thank you.
I just feel that it's funny because the conflict of interest, she's paying somebody, and I spoke with somebody from North Township, she's paying somebody on the board to represent her, for one. You guys aren't the neighbors, I live back there, I've dealt with this lady from day one. She's faking all to you, I spoke with this man back in, they're already done with it. I spoke with the man back in the corner that she's lying to you guys, I said, how do you guys know? He said, the only thing you can do is you have her stand up and say she's telling the truth. And now you guys can't even respond to anything, that just shows everything. They just ended the whole thing. They just approved it out of the like her lawyers representing her, and they're on the board, and they're not even answering, so like, whatever. I hope you guys know there has to be a fence around the retention
Just remember, this is a great country that affords everyone the opportunity to articulate their opinion.
Even if they're
And we did allow the public to speak.
Actually, since the applicant's here real quick, I'll just surprise them. Ms. Mindrell. So just the next step on this, just so you know, is I have to take this recommendation to the Board of Trustees. They have to formally acknowledge it and then schedule your public hearing. I don't know exactly when that's going to happen. They do have some special meetings coming up in the next couple of weeks. I will see if I can get it on one of those agendas, because otherwise you'd have to wait till the meeting in the first Thursday in November. But as soon as that happens, I will communicate that to you. If there are any dates in the next 30 to 40, 50, 60 days, basically throughout the end of the year, that you know don't work for you, please communicate those to me as soon as possible so the board doesn't select one of those dates.
Okay, ready? Okay, the time is 7:36. We'll call the following hearing to order at 7:37 PM. This portion of the meeting is the Genoa Township Trustees initiated zoning text and map amendment ZC 2021-04 to create a Hoover Watershed Overlay District, Article 7, along with minimal amendments to current articles related to the creation of said district and zoning administration. So it says here to swear in anybody who's going to be participating in any kind of conversation. You two?
No, I'm actually hiding.
Okay.
I was a Polaris when that incident happened, and I'm sitting here going, man, I don't want to be.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay. I'm going to read the legal notice for this meeting was printed and published on September 29th, 2021 in the Delaware Gazette and posted at the Genoa Township Hall on September 27th, 2021. The subject amendment affects more than 10 parcels. As such, mailing notice to property owners is not required per the Genoa Township zoning resolution in Ohio Revised Code. The following were marked as exhibits A through H. A, legal notice. B, affidavit of advertisement. C, sign-in sheet. D, zoning text map amendment dated September 2nd of this year. E, list of parcels to be included within the Hoover Watershed Overlay District dated September 2nd of this year. Delaware County Regional Planning Commission recommendation made September 30th of this year. G, staff memorandum dated October 5th of 2021 for October 12th of 2021. Exhibit H, all public comments received between September 2nd and October 12th of this year. Joe, staff report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So before you have a nearly 7-page memorandum that I am entering into the record, as you noted through the exhibit list.
Oh, I'm sorry, Joe, I don't have a copy of that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I didn't get a memorandum either.
I don't
just
have a
got
copy
your-
of it either.
Did I not mail that out? Oh, dear. Well, my apologies on that. If you want, I can go print it out for you. I can just review
I'll
it.
just read.
Okay, I'm not going to read through the whole entire thing. I will definitely make sure you get copies of it. But it essentially just spells out the history of how we got here, the process,
Which is what we reviewed before.
the comprehensive plan, citations of why this is supported. And then I basically bullet point all the changes. So I'm not going to read it verbatim. I'll try to just hit the highlights here. Like I said, we will enter it into the record. It'll be a public record, and we'll get a printout for you. And my sincerest apologies on that.
Let me just ask before you proceed.
Yes, sir.
Has everybody even had a chance to read it?
Yeah, I've read Article 7. It's-
Okay. Jeff? I've reviewed it. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so essentially, as you know, back in early September, the trustees unanimously passed a resolution to initiate this amendment, hence why it's before you this evening. As I've sort of indicated before, as when I mentioned to you that this was probably coming down the pike, what this amendment essentially does is creates an overlay zoning district that will apply to all parcels wholly or partially within the Hoover Reservoir watershed. And what it does is it adds additional zoning regulations on top of those which are already applicable, mainly in regards to planned developments. But there is a little small impact on the straight zoning districts, the RR and SR zoning districts and community business districts as well. Unlike a lot of other overlays we've seen, we've explicitly made this a mandatory zoning overlay, so it's not like one of those opt-in things or pull down the cloud things. It's if you develop a property that falls within this watershed that's applicable to this overlay, you have to follow the additional standards which are outlined in the overlay. In many cases, which are more strict than the base zoning district standards or even the planned zoning district standards, with essentially the goal being that Hoover Reservoir comprises so much of the township. I have the stats in here somewhere. The reservoir itself comprises approximately 17% of the acreage in Genoa Township, and its associated watershed as a whole, including the reservoir, comprises over 45% of said acreage of the entire township. So it takes up a significant area of the township. I mean, when you look at a map of Genoa, it's the first thing that your eye gets drawn to. So with that, so much of the township being in Hoover or its watershed, I think the township has definitely demonstrated that it's a unique asset, and we have a interest in that, and it's in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare to take additional steps to make sure we're protecting it and making sure the development happens within the watershed is reasonable and is mindful of the environmental impacts, the fact that Hoover is an important drinking water source, it's an educational source, there's a lot of studies that go on down there at all grade ranges, even into the college ages, because it's the ecosystem. City of Columbus has like a day camp retreat on the east side of the water that they use in that area for educational purposes. Obviously, there's wildlife, plant life. It really has it all, really, in terms of unique aspects and what it provides to the community. So that's essentially the justification that we're using. The memorandum, the resolution amendment really spell it out in detail better than what I just concisely stated there. But those are the reasons why we've decided that this area is unique and deserves special, unique treatment. Hence, that's why this was drafted up. This was an idea we floated a couple years ago. The commission at that time just decided it wasn't the right time to do that. So instead, we made significant revisions to the PRD district itself. Over the course of the past couple years, we've obviously seen more development and things have happened. And the board just felt like, based on what was going on, that this was the right time to bring this topic back to light and see if there was an interest in actually adopting or moving forward with this concept. So they opted to, like I said, initiate it. That way the commission can review it, make a recommendation on it, and the board can make the decision on whether or not it's something that should go forward.
So, question.
Yes.
Let's just assume worst-case scenario that Westerville City, the Columbus or Village of Galena annexes. Does this have any impact?
Well, it would have impact on any of the land that doesn't get annexed.
Okay, but. Yeah. Okay, I'm just out.
Oh, if the land that they annex, no, it would not have any impact at that point, because once you're out of the township, you're out of the township, including zoning, so I'm
I
sorry.
didn't know if there was something special about an overlay that.
No, I wish that was the case, but no,
Okay.
unfortunately, that's not the case. So this doesn't protect us from annexation, but it really doesn't really change our exposure on that front either. I mean, that land could be annexed right now, it could be annexed under this overlay, so I don't really think it changes much, other than the fact, the gap between what the other adjacent municipality might allow and what we allow might get a little wider. But also, a lot of those annexations happen because of sewer and water, which is not an item that we really can compete with. So if a parcel wants to develop and it's got to be on Galena sewer, and Galena says, well, yep, but part of that deal is you're going to be part of the Galena. It doesn't really matter how wide the chasm is between what Galena allows and what Genoa allows. The fact is Galena has the sewer and we don't. So that's essentially how it would work. So moving on. So the boundaries of the watershed, you all should have the map in front of you. We did define specifically the boundaries in the zoning resolution. We're using 3 different sub-watersheds as defined by United States Geological Survey. All of those watersheds feed directly or immediately directly into Hoover Reservoir via It either flows directly into the reservoir itself, directly into the upper Big Walnut Creek, which then directly dumps into Hoover Reservoir, or into Duncan Run, which then goes into Hoover Reservoir. All other land in Genoa and eventually ends up down in Alum Creek via either Alum Reservoir, Alum Creek directly via Orange or Westerville, or via the Westerville Reservoir. But obviously, the reason we're not doing something for that section of the township, or at least under this proposal, is none of Alum Creek and a very, very, very small percentage of Alum Reservoir itself are in Genoa Township, which is very much unlike Hoover, which the vast majority of Hoover is in Genoa Township. So that's why, to me, that's the difference between the lands in the Alum Creek watersheds and the Hoover watersheds.
So, quick question.
Yes, sir.
Just for context, has, I guess it would be Berkshire and/or Orange Townships, do they have a similar watershed zoning?
I honestly have not researched that. I'm not aware of any, but I didn't specifically look to see if they did or not.
And would that be more so than a lot of the land is Army Corps of Engineers and maybe?
Yeah, a lot of the stuff along Alum, even a section in Genoa Township, is owned by, I think, essentially the federal government or the state.
Got it, okay.
I think Hoover's owned by the city of Columbus.
So Hoover's owned by the city of Columbus. The dam might be regulated by the Army Corps, but the dam itself in the water is city of Columbus, whereas Alum is, I think, Army Corps, and then ODNR essentially just, I think, polices the boating and whatnot that goes on it.
Joe, my question for you is, so I understand that any property owner that falls within this would be grandfathered, the term that a lot of people say, and that it wouldn't be applicable for them to have any reason to believe that this is going to supersede what they own now or what they bought, and that they're going to have to bring their home, their land, their items up to what the new code would be for this
Correct.
overlay. My concern would be is if somebody has lived on a property for a long period of time and then they want to put a new shed on, or they want to do something because they've got this large parcel of land and, you know, then all of a sudden, is there any protection on anything of that nature or anything new that goes there? They're going to have to go through.
In regards to like the scenario where it's basically going to, I'll have to answer that on almost a scenario by scenario basis, but like in your shed example, absolutely nothing in here as currently drafted changes any regulations that are already in effect today. You
So
could still put a shed on it, it'd be the same setbacks, the same lot coverage.
So my question was in the same line as Ms. Welch's, that this is going to set the table for future boards or trustees to revise it and maybe enforce some environmental restrictions on, because in this thing, we all live in probably this overlay.
Yeah, and several of you do.
Prevent in 10 years, trustees decide that they want to create restrictions on these existing subdivisions. What is to prevent that from happening? Is there any?
If I may add to your statement, because it's, you know, a lot of this is going to be covered by homeowners associations to some degree, to your point, Sarah, but then there's the whole eastern side of the reservoir, which is pretty wide open. Large single real estate tracts that, not that they are not unregulated, but they are not homeowners association more than likely regulated. That's a good point. That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean,
How
so I guess
That's
to
concerning to me.
speak to Mr. Antonette's point, I mean, certainly this does create a framework where if any officials in the future wanted to further pull back on what's allowable on a piece of property in the straight zoning districts, the framework would be here to do that. That said,
I'm not talking about the straight zoning district.
You talking about
I'm
the plan districts?
existing- My concern would be is they decide that the subdivisions that are in this overlay can no longer treat their lawns. Or any other restriction that currently doesn't exist. You're opening up the opportunity.
Yes.
well, that wouldn't be
For
a,
this
that's
to-
really not a zoning thing, that'd be a property maintenance issue. I have a hard time.
Okay, so then this isn't a zoning thing either. This is about, if this is true, this is about protecting Hoover Reservoir. I'm all for it. Me and my family use the Hoover in all kinds of ways, boating, kayaking, fishing, walking trails. I'm all for protecting Hoover Reservoir. I would suggest that, first of all, has Columbus indicated that Genoa is a problem with Hoover Reservoir?
No, but there's been numerous conflicts between Columbus and the residents around Hoover in the past.
Okay, do you know that Columbus has strict standards along their shorelines to protect itself from erosion?
Yes, and we've provided the
Sedimentation.
city a copy of this. They haven't provided commentary back to us. But I did present this.
So, and then the other, a lot of this is just perception stuff.
No, I
But
understand
what
that.
concerns me is, first of all, I'm all for lower in density. I don't know that there's any science that says that changing the density in this overlay is going to impact Hoover Reservoir. You're still doing the same thing to the land. Also to note, when you do a PRD, you have to comply with the Highway EPA for water quality. So they're already addressing runoff and how it might impact Hoover Reservoir. The other one I have a problem with is by creating this, we're inferring that our current standards aren't environmentally compliant. Yeah. That you're saying is, okay, our regular PRD is a pollutant, and we need to do this overlay because our regular PRD pollutes, but there's no science behind that.
I guess you could interpret it that way. That's not how I read it. I think I'm reading it as what we do is good. We're trying to do even better in this particular area. I guess it's sort of glass half full, glass half empty kind of viewpoint on that. And I mean, really, I think there's a big fear here that what we're trying to do is change the existing developments or any existing constructed elements, and that's really not the case. Really, where this is going to get triggered, to be completely candid, is any new PRDs probably in this area. Any new commercial industrial would have to be approved under a rezoning to those zoning districts, and the comprehensive plan, nor any of the feedback we've gotten over the years has indicated that there's really any desire for any further commercial or industrial zoning in the township at this time. So I'm less concerned about that happening, although we did build some controls in here should some future board ever decide to do that. Could a future board really tighten it up on existing development? Yes, but I mean, that's the case even if this doesn't get adopted. If the board years from now decides they want to just tighten things up, they can just tighten things up. And if the commission will review, it would go through this exact same process, the commission will review it, and if the board wants to do it, the board will adopt it. So I'm not sure this really increases the possibility of that happening. I think people are going to do in the future what they do in the future. I'm not sure there's too many unknown variables, I think, for us to accurately predict or try to craft this to prevent them from doing that. Because they can always just rescind it. They could rescind this, they could rescind the whole zoning resolution.
I got it. So, did you write this? This
I
whole
did,
thing?
yes.
This whole thing was authored by you? And I'm just trying to protect us. I'm not pointing any blame at you, or I'm just trying to get
I
my head
understand.
wrapped around. So this is pretty significant
Very.
proposal, very significant.
Absolutely
proposal.
it is.
Impacts a significant number of people's property rights. What is your science that says that what you're proposing here with setbacks, bushes, trees, mowable grass is going to protect Hoover Reservoir? What is the science behind all that?
I think less density leads to less
Where is the
area
science
being
behind that?
covered.
What is it?
I haven't done, I mean, to be candid, I didn't do a lot of scientific research. I am reacting to years of public comment that we've gotten about this issue, and candidly trying to bring back efforts that were previously made by the township to achieve these very goals with the PRRCD and the old recommendations in the comp plan that didn't work. And I'm trying to find a way to make those work, because the public comment that we've been getting over the years, in my opinion, has been people still very much want those things. So what staff and I think the board was trying to do was acknowledge and acquiesce to the feedback that we've been getting from the public about preserving the rural character, protecting Hoover. I mean, these are all things that got brought up during some of these recent development hearings. And I feel like zoning can only do so much. I mean, I can't control stormwater best management practices, as you allude to. Federal regulations, state regulations, county regulations all dictate that. But I do feel like the increased setbacks, the lower densities, the increased plantings do help enhance the character of the area. I don't have, it's not really a scientific thing. I don't think it's, providing for more plantings, obviously, we all know plants help clean the air, plants help clean the water goes through them. Do I have studies to produce that? No, but I think that's a pretty basic concept that we all know and understand. So
All right,
I
Joe,
think more
Joe,
green
all
space,
right,
the
Joe,
better.
so I agree. I think all those things contribute to the rural feel.
Mm-hmm.
My concern is, we're doing this to protect Hoover Reservoir, and I'm not buying it.
It's not just the environmental component is just a component, though. I think we're a little fixated on the environmental component of this and not, this resolution also talks about the rural character and the intent. So environmental is a big part of it, but it's not the sole component of it, of the purpose here. So I don't want to go astray, and, I think the text bears out sort of what I'm
And
saying
I hear
when
the
it talks about the
underlying
intent.
concern of making sure that in the future, that we have the proper deciduous plants and things that are positive for Hoover and the community. My concern is that we're doing an overlay on an awful lot of long-term residents that literally we are incorporating their property into something that has an impact on their land and property use rights forevermore.
And if I may add to Sarah's comment, Joe, the other large, there's another large landowner in this area, and that is the company that owns Medallion,
Mm-hmm.
which is a large green area.
Yes.
It also is an area that treats its grass and is in a watershed, and all the things there. What voice do they have in this decision ultimately, other than through our body and their trustee? Is there a large public comment that we'll have on the decision made here?
This is the opportunity. This is the hearing. We're not required to send notice to all these property owners because the revised code says any more than 10, you don't have to. And this would be 2,000 plus something mailings to each parcel. A little
Joe,
less
if
than
I
that
may
because there's a
offer
lot of
pushback,
redundancy. But
if I was one of those property owners and I've lived in Genoa Township as long as I have, and I found out that there was a meeting and I didn't know that they were laying this on my property,
Because the
I can
law
tell
didn't
you what,
require it.
you wouldn't have a friend in the township very quickly because I would feel like this got pushed through very quickly without people having awareness and knowledge to discuss.
I think
have
that's why the
concern with
board
that.
put it in front of you. They want the discussion. If the reaction from the commission or the public is this isn't a good idea, I'm sure the board will probably
I'll go to this
be
statement.
inclined to listen to that.
I'll go to this statement. The subject amendment affects more than 10 parcels. I find this really conflicting. As such, mailing notice to property owners is not required. I would think that the more people that it affects, the more there should be notices sent out. Whether it's 2,000 or it's 100.
That's how the revised code reads.
No, and I
Well, that
respect
doesn't
the
mean we have to
ORC.
follow
I respect that the ORC says that, but these are our citizens in Genoa Township. And this is something that long last, a quick overlay meeting, and I have grave concern. I have grave concern about it.
That, I understand. I guess I'm not sure. I guess I just don't see this overlay as really impacting, other than unless your intention is eventually to sell your property to a developer, which admittedly, this will
But we have,
impact
but we
that,
have zoning for that. So if a developer is bringing
Right.
forth something, all the concerns here can be brought forth to the developer and the owner of the property.
No, we
they
can't
can-
ad hoc to it. We have to make, if that's something you want, you need to write it down, and you need to regulate it.
No, but I mean, you can talk about the plants that are gonna be in a community. You can talk about
But if
things
you
of
don't
that
require
nature.
it, they can just tell you, thanks for your opinion, and not do
The
it.
issue here comes down to density.
Yes.
That is the trees and all that stuff is secondary to the issue of density. The fact of the matter is, for 99% of these people, it's not gonna apply to them.
This isn't.
No.
This
No,
right
but
now
that doesn't
isn't.
prevent further
Yes.
growing. That's how, we all know that's how it works. Somebody comes
Absolutely.
in 5 years and decides they
Right.
want to implement something that Medallion can't discharge into their wetlands and into the street. I'm all for lower density too.
Right, right, right.
I don't think this is the tool
I don't think-
to regulate density.
I would agree. I don't think anybody is planning on some high-density thing coming in here. They've seen the pattern of our growth in Genoa Township, and they know by now that this is not a township that's just gonna roll over and play dead. But I'm not sure this is the avenue to take to do that.
I don't understand your concerns with respect to existing property owners, because this has absolutely no impact on existing structures, existing property owners, existing density.
Today, once you
True.
create, but once you create a district,
In 4 years, if we have an entirely different board of trustees, they can change the whole damn thing. They can change the whole
Exactly.
damn zoning.
That's exactly right.
So, I mean,
They can do that currently.
yeah, they can do
Right.
it currently.
We have in place.
And you know what? I mean, nothing is permanent in terms of the zoning resolution, or the zoning book and the zoning regulations. And so I live out here on the wild, wild east, according to Charlie over there, that, you know,
Not wild, just let us regulate.
and we like it that way.
Oh, you're about to get more
when you're
regulated.
about to get more regulated.
But you know what?
If it's if you're applying for rezoning.
But it's only if you're gonna put in, I mean, so we don't have sewer on the east side of the hinterland. And so a couple of years ago, my neighbor was looking at developing, putting a house on a smaller parcel that they own. According to Delaware County, you can't put a house on less than 2.5 acres, because you gotta have enough room for the septic system, and then a replacement septic system at some point in the future. So indirectly, those density regulations are already in effect as it stands today, which is why the east side is the way it is, because there's no sewer over there, obviously. I support this overlay. I'd like to see a few tweaks to it, but I think it's a fantastic idea. Townships have absolutely no basis, no legal authority to restrict runoff or wetlands or anything like that. I mean, that is not, unless the Ohio Revised Code is changed by the Ohio legislature, the triumvirate has no authority whatsoever to regulate any of that stuff. None.
Let me
So
ask you a
I
question.
don't have that fear.
Which is why we're going after in this, the setbacks, the plantings, the density, we're going after the things, I shouldn't say go
And
after.
I can say
We're
from somebody
addressing
that
the
does live on
things-
the east side, because there is a lot more topography or change in the topography than on the west side of the township. Runoff is an issue. I spent $10,000 last year having my property regraded because of runoff. All of my neighbors face runoff issues. We've got flat areas because there isn't enough runoff. I mean, there is literally 20 foot of elevation change from the front end of my property to the back end of my property. Drainage is an issue on the east side of Hoover Reservoir for all of us.
So in regards to like,
Before you jump in,
yes,
I
sir.
want to ask a question, generally, just so my mind is situated here. Is one of the risks in doing this the fact that by doing the overlay, we now have created a part within the township that is a class? So rather than having each individual property be tested and assessed through our zoning resolution and our zoning guidance, overlay can say for all of these properties, this is what we're doing regardless of good or purpose.
No, that's not the way it's written.
Okay, I just wanted to,
Because if you look through
thank
the
you,
rest.
because I wanted to make sure it was right in
At
my
least
mind.
not the way that I read the proposed changes to
See what
the
I mean?
zoning code. It's the overlay, but then the rural residential, the whatever restrictions or zoning sections still apply to that specific classification,
correct, and they remain 99% the way they currently exist. I think the only changes I made was I eliminated a few uses that were permitted in those zoning districts, and they related to essentially non-residential uses in those zoning districts.
But I hope you guys don't
Lot-
think I'm stupid, but I mean, that was a question
Like,
I had.
so in Chip's scenario, the rules regarding how he can expand his house, put on accessory buildings, establish conditional uses on his property, subdivide his property, all would 100% remain exactly the same as currently drafted. Changes absolutely nothing. The only thing that changes if sewer's available there and he wants to sell his property, the developer's gonna say, well, I can't do 2.2, I'd only be allowed to do max 1.65. I mean, and they'd have to do the additional setbacks and the plantings and all that stuff. But in regards to conventional, traditional subdivisions in the rural residential, this would not preclude anyone from doing a 2-acre lot conventional subdivision and would absolutely change nothing from a regulatory standpoint about how those subdivisions happen or what they have to be designed. Where this will really most likely ever get triggered is a PRD that's in this watershed. And if we run into instances where it doesn't 100% make sense on that property, as I've sort of testified before, that's what the divergence process is 100% exists for, is to account, just like we had in J.C. Manny. There was situations on that property, there were regulations that didn't make sense on that property. They asked for requests for relief, and the commission just recommended that those conditions be approved. So that's the process. So I think there's some fear here that we're like totally changing the ground underneath these, especially these rural residential, suburban residential, or even like the existing medallion properties. To Mr. Welch's point, I agree. The vast majority of the regulations that apply to those properties, like the medallion final development plan is always going to trump this overlay because it existed first. If medallion doesn't ever come back and want to amend its development plan, its approved development plan will remain in perpetuity. Now, sections of the zoning resolution that their development plan doesn't speak to could be amended, but again, that possibility exists already. So there's always the possibility of the zoning resolution changing on people.
Right,
So
but
Joe,
when you
this
target
sub
it-
3 here really, in reading it, defines what you just stated.
Sub 3 on, I'm sorry, which page?
General tax on property.
Yes, I go into that really in detail because I knew this was going to be one of the primary concerns. So I really wanted to make sure I brought that issue to light. So I really go in depth on talking about how this overlay does and does not affect essentially the straight zoning districts and how really it primarily goes after the plan developed. I keep using the word go after. It really addresses concerns that get typically raised when we deal with plan developments and even more specifically the PRDs.
But it's not just PRDs. It's all
No,
plans.
because I wanted to make sure we anticipated, should something else happen, that we were prepared for it. And again, to Mr. Welch's point, there's no sewer on the east side. But once upon a time, there wasn't a lot of sewer north of Big Walnut Road either. And we've been dealing with, a lot of the issues we're dealing with, the PRD development happening up there and the rules and the comp plan and stuff existed, in my opinion, frankly, because people before us did not think far enough ahead about what are we going to do when the status quo changes. The status quo on the east side is not going to exist forever. Columbus is working on putting a sewer line all the way up to Smothers Road in the next several years. I've seen the preliminary drawings for it. Galena didn't build a new sewer plant to not add customers to it.
They've already annexed south on Sunbury Road to the United Methodist Church. To my understanding, there's 400-plus homes going in there at Vans Valley, Sunbury Road area. So,
And should this scenario ever change where Galena has to provide sewer but can't force someone to annex, if the revised code changes, we want to be prepared for when that 300-acre plot over on the east side, should it develop, is 2.2 PRD, if that's what currently the law is allowing for. This amendment would pull that back a bit.
to Mr. Moore's point about medallions, so let's prognosticate for a second that worst-case scenario happens to medallion and the club folds, and there's no more golf, i.e. Blackhawk. And it becomes more beneficial to the corporation or to whomever to sell all that land instead of having a golf course there. Now you've got density protection.
I'm not sure I follow, but my concern, I got another concern is, I think this is very onerous. I mean, when I read it, and you're defining trees and low-mow and setbacks, which I support. My concern, the other concern I have is if we make this so complicated, I know developers, I work with them, they're going to take the path of least resistance. So what's going to happen is if it becomes too restrictive to do reasonable development, they're going to start looking to annex. And then we lose everything.
That is absolutely correct.
And that is, I agree.
So I don't
That's-
want to make it
that's
so
something-
cumbersome
Mhm.
that developers identify a parcel and they will investigate how to annex. If they have to buy properties to make it contiguous to annex it, they'll do it.
They will.
So for that reason, I think we need to reach out, do a better effort of reaching out to the residents that are impacted by this. This is just my opinion. I think this is substantial enough that saying by law we don't have to notify people is a cop-out.
I definitely think we need to notify the residents.
You can put together
And I-
2,000
and
something
I have-
mailers, but get
I
ready
have the
for
luxury
a
of being
lot
here,
of
I'm
comments.
talking. I have the luxury of being here the longest. And I know when we were talking about this thing, it was about density. And we created this watershed district because we knew we couldn't define it by streets or properties. So this is a ruse.
Certainly
Tell me
if
I'm wrong.
the commission's not comfortable with this moving forward, I mean, you have no obligation to give it a favorable recommendation. The board simply asks that you review it and provide your honest opinions, and I think they do want to hear your honest opinions. I think they've even said on the record, if the commission opts that they don't like it, I think they're willing to consider the commission's opinion on that. I do not think that this is something that the board's just gonna railroad through. I really do think they bounced, one of the reasons they initiated this is because they really don't want to hear your honest opinions of it. If you just think it's not a good idea, or not the right idea, or needs to go back to the drawing board, I think that's what they want to, they do want to know that.
I think we've sat through enough meetings on rezonings, and the question of density has come up continually. And when we got our interpretation and direction that the comp plan could no longer be used from a value piece, and it was only the resolution, we had to figure out what that number was. This board at one point came back with a certain density number. I did not agree with that number that was presented because I could not mathematically come up with what that number was. And what is currently in the resolution, I can mathematically come up with a reason that it is 2.2. Okay? There is enough comment that we have had over time that this topic of overlay does make sense, that it is close in proximity to Hoover. It talks about the density, it talks about the rural characteristics of what we live in, and it makes sense to put a different number in that area. There has to be a reason behind it. We can't spot zone, we can't say zone planning 4 and planning 1 have different densities. We understand we can't do that. However, this allows that to happen, and it has been a big request from a number of people that have talked in these meetings to us. So I am in agreement with what Joe has put together. I think it is right. My only question and concern with it is the number that we're putting in there from a zoning, from a density perspective, and where those numbers actually come from. I understand there's methodology behind it with what was originally put in from a sewer perspective, but I would like to discuss what those numbers are and where we can scientifically or mathematically come up with what the right number is. Because we know that 2.2 surrounding those areas and knowing that sewer is coming on the east side, that does not make sense for the majority of people that have talked in these meetings. I am fine talking about that. The other concerns, I like the idea. I think an overlay is a great idea. We have had comments about and discussions about putting an overlay in for years about this. This now makes sense to me. So I understand the other concerns that have been voiced. I like where this is at. I think we talk about the density number, and we go from there.
And Mr. Hampton, that's just, there's no doubt that density is a component of this, big component of this. Absolutely, I would agree that, I wouldn't go as far as this, maybe say, call it a ruse, but I would say definitely, I mean, I think Mr. Leff just put it pretty well. We've gotten a lot of feedback, a lot of it's related to density.
I don't know what the definition of a lot is. When you're talking about thousands of pieces of property, dozens is not a lot, hundreds isn't even a lot. I'm okay, I mean, Dave's kind of made our point, which is this density thing, there is no science in relation to protecting the Hoover Reservoir. There is no science behind the density. You can't tell me why 1.65 is better than 2.2 to protect Hoover Reservoir. And, I mean, we work for these people. This is we work for them. And if they ask me the question, I need to be able to answer the question. And right now, I don't have the answer on why 1.65, which I support, I'm okay with lower density, but why is 1.65 better than 2.2? If you do structural things to protect Hoover Reservoir, what does the density do to protect Hoover Reservoir?
I would say lower density means less lots, which means less impervious surface in the development comparatively to 2.2, which also means fewer lawns, smaller square footage of lawns that are going to be treated. It's going to be more untreated open space because they're not going to be spreading fertilizer, especially if you use the low-mow option and then the no disturb area. Now, I guess we have the discussion of whether it's going to be statistically significant. That's probably a different conversation. But I think the point that lower density is going to be good, at least from a fertilizer impervious surface coverage standpoint. I mean, I think that's just arithmetic, that you're going to have less.
And it's not like the number that's being presented is different than what we already have in the township already. I mean, you've put a number together, I think Vinmar was the number, right? 165.
165 essentially comes from the fact that Vinmar is the most dense plan in this watershed.
So, I mean, it's not like we're going down to 1. We're definitely not at
No one can-
at 2. You know,
We've all been pretty happy with the Vinmar Farms development. I think it looks a pretty pleasant looking and feeling development in there, and, you know, so much so that it got mimicked 2 more times.
So I have a question. This may be more for the trustees,
Mhm.
but, you know, my job's managing risk, and so I look at this and I'm listening, and I'm trying to determine what the end game and goal is. Is this providing more upside potential for our township in terms of how we will be viewed as a good place to try to develop? Is it a message to other communities, the state, citizens that will be, no, we don't want any future density or development? I mean, I'm trying to figure out what is the real end game, because I think there is a strategic risk here that is fairly significant, and how other municipalities, people, potential taxpayers will view the community. And there could be a very positive view. I mean, I don't know enough about it. Hey, you know, we've got a great area, we love Hoover, and we don't want a lot of people living around it anymore. But I will go on record, I'll state this to any of our trustees, I don't like in the manner that this came to this commission, period. I do not think that it is an open, honest, and direct method to promulgate what we're talking about today. The proper method should have been, hey, we want to reintroduce this idea, and we have a group of zoning commissioners that have been appointed by trustees and past trustees to discuss that and then present it to our group of trustees. And that's all I have on it today.
I guess I would ask, I would suggest that if the trustees are serious, that we consider a special public meeting and do a better job of sending out invites. I don't know if that's by mail or what.
I mean, we do have methods to communicate other than just the mail. I mean, it wouldn't be a mail's the only targeted
Then that's probably the best method to do
notification. I
it.
mean, we have the social media, we have the constant contact.
Every month or every 2 months or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll be able to meet the deadline.
Then I think this is significant enough to the township and to those affected. I think then if it has to be a direct mail piece, then it needs to be a direct mail piece.
Is there a deadline?
At this point, no. You could just continue the hearing and it could just sort of go on. I mean, if you continue it without a date, time, place certain, I'm going to have to re-advertise.
I don't think this is worth rushing through. I think it needs more consideration than this one meeting.
Oh, there was nothing that, yeah, you're under no obligation to make a
Okay.
decision this meeting.
Yeah.
Absolutely
All
not.
right.
It's just like any other zoning hearing.
Has there been any public comment back yet on this?
I have heard nothing.
I got an email from Mr. Bird.
Oh, I'm sorry.
On
Yes,
West Shore
Mr. Bird
Drive.
did provide
That
comment.
was early. It was very.
Yes, that was the
That was
one that
right
I know
I
of.
think this was after the trustees' public meeting.
Yeah, it was right after Joe sent us.
Yeah,
like, this.
Yeah, as you know, Mr. Bird keeps a pretty close eye on things,
Yeah.
and so he knew this was going on and was prepared with his comments.
So, Mr. Moore, to your comment about trustees and future and if you pull out the map and you take a look at the bottom portion here, this is a monument. This whole 1,000 acres that was annexed by the city of Westerville.
Right.
This is a monument to the Board of Trustees' lack of foresight. We lost all that because the Board of Trustees, like mid-90s?
The annexations, I think, started in the 60s and went through the
Yeah,
90s.
south of Waxtown?
Yeah.
Oh, that wasn't the 90s.
Oh, no,
Well
that wasn't in
before
the
that.
90s.
No,
No,
Westerville annexed 900 and some acres from Genoa Township.
That might have been like the West Star area.
Yeah,
No,
so
that's not that.
this is the monument to lack of foresight.
No, what it is the availability of sanitary sewer.
Well,
Right.
That's
No,
what that,
And if you're not
foresight.
careful and do this properly, you're gonna see a lot more of that in what was Genoa Township at some point.
One more question again, and it sounds like even more conversion's gonna happen north.
It is. Yeah, that is correct. In Sunbury.
I'm just trying to
Is it
settle with
infrastructure?
strategically, and it's just my orientation, you guys can tell me to be quiet. What are we trying to really accomplish in terms of the safety and soundness of the community? How does this help the community? How does this increase our value to the public? Or how does it protect what could be a diminished value to the public?
Dovetailing off of that, I think you have to have public comments. I think you have to have them, afford them the opportunity to be able to see what this could do.
I mean, Joe, this could be the best thing ever, and it could really help us, you know? I mean, I moved here because I didn't want to have, everything tied down and bolted down. And then people decide to give tax abatements to companies that, just meant that at the end of the day, individual residents like all of us pay more for, proposed development. This was always ran, I think, very well. So that's my question. Maybe we're here to answer that. But.
No, I think
Joe,
that's
for
an
the
important
record-
consideration.
For the record, I think, could you confirm Mr. Fowler reviewed this?
Yes, he did. He got back to me late today. He actually, now, of course, Mr. Fowler just does the legal review. He's not gonna do
But that's important. for
the policy strategic review. He's not gonna tell you whether or not he thinks you ought to do the overlay. He's just gonna do the legal stuff. So he did have just a few comments. Number one, the standard verbiage that repeats throughout all the other zoning districts about any lot within this district shall be applicable to this, yada, yada. He just suggested deleting the word stricter and adding after the word requirements of Article 7, and just to make it clear that the requirements of Article 7 would trump any of the requirements in the base zoning districts when the two conflict. Because he asked me, well, are there any situations where Article 7 is more lenient than the existing zoning districts? And I said, well, not that I know of. I couldn't think of any. I wasn't aware of any. I said, I was just trying to, belt suspenders just in case I forgot something. But I said, it does make sense that Article 7 is intended to be more strict basically in every aspect. So that was his recommendation there. And then he also recommended, I can hand it out to you. Would you like me to hand it out? I just printed out his notes. You can just see them on paper, or I can email them out to you.
Yeah, you can email.
He recommended some changes to the verbiage of section 70103, which is some administrative verbiage about how this relates to existing developments in regards to ambiguity. And then he also suggested just straight out deleting proposed section 70104 because he just said it's unnecessary because it's essentially already an existing legal thing that would happen anyway, so there's really no need to codify it. I believe was essentially
I have a question.
the
How-
feedback.
What was the determining factor of how this line fell?
The line, that is the border of the 3 sub-watersheds that make up Hoover Watershed as delineated by the United States Geological Survey.
And so at what degree of accuracy, this matters because, especially because
Sure.
of the provision
Sure.
where if 90% of your property is not in the watershed, you're in the watershed. And that's another one I really have a big problem with, especially because USGS degree of accuracy is
It's not-
probably plus or
right.
minus 20 feet.
Right.
So I told you, regional planning, can you take the USGS layers and overlay them on Genoa Township, these 3 sub-watersheds? And they said yes, and this is the map that they
Oh, they
produced.
produced it?
Yeah, oh, I didn't do it, yeah, no, I relied on the when it comes to this stuff, I rely on the experts to do it, so. Delaware County Regional Planning Commission's GIS expert in-house did this for me. In fact,
one other
we actually
question.
modified it based on, it's different than the map I had done internally, because I found out the USGS data I was using was actually from like 1980, and this is actually more updated. I think, I have the dates written down somewhere in my notes about where these sub-watersheds were last delineated, but it's much more accurate than the map I had originally come up with. And then speaking to the point, whether it was wholly in or wholly out, or partially in or partially out, the board even discussed that as they were debating this before they initiated it. And where I came down on was, you either have to say, to me, the zoning map has to be 100% abundantly clear what the zoning is of your property and what the rules are of your property. So to me, that left us with 3 options in regards to how this got implemented. Either you had to be a parcel that was wholly, actually, well, 2 options. You had to be wholly in, or you had to be wholly or partially in. We couldn't do this percentage stuff for a couple reasons. You can't, I don't know the acreage of all these parcels, and how that gets delineated can change with right-of-way acquisitions and all that stuff. So number 1, trying to figure out which, 20% of this parcel or whatever number you wanted to use was gonna be very difficult to actually map out. What was even more difficult to map out was, what if there's a parcel assemblage for a PRD? It's a development of like 3 parcels. It may not be, that percentage changes, so there was no way, yes, so there was absolutely no way for me to anticipate that, because I have no idea what's gonna happen. So to me, the most clear-cut way was to do wholly or partially in, because we were not making a judgment call of, well, is it wholly in, or is it 99% in? Oh, I might see a little green sliver in there. What GIS basically was told to do was, listen, here's the part, look at all the parcels, any area where that layer crosses over, when they do like a function, call that parcel out and pull it into this overlay. And to me, if you have like a parcel, and we get a development, and this overlay was in place, and someone says, really, I've got to do all this stuff, and I've got like 2% in this watershed, again, to me, that's what the divergence process is for. And if the commission and the board agree with
This
that.
exact discussion is what I struggle with, is because you are deciding what properties are in and out without public involvement. This discussion should
Well,
be
no,
had with.
I just drafted a version of this. I'm not
Yeah, but you
making
did.
any decisions. Well, no, I posited it to the board. The board ultimately decided to move forward with this, knowing it was gonna have to go through the public hearing process, get the commission's feedback, get any public feedback we got as part of that process. So I'm not deciding anything. I was just asked to what I thought was best, and this is my recommendation, what I think is best, if we go forward with this. The commission's free to disagree with it or recommend denial.
2 more questions on just one. Is there, to your knowledge, any other watersheds in central Ohio that we could maybe look at and use as an example?
There are a couple,
Grove City, or,
I don't
wherever it
know.
might be.
I don't know if there's an apples to apples to what we're doing here, but I am aware of a couple of different accords that exist out there
Yeah,
across
Big
multiple
Darby.
communities. The Big Darby is probably the most
If you could
well-known
just-
one.
If you could maybe email, that's just something, again, knowledge. And then my second question is, we have to be prepared to provide enforcement if this does go through. And not just in an upfront development mode, but in a
Continue.
Hey, to your point, Sarah, I'd like to put a shed on the back of my lot and keep my lawnmower there.
See that, I guess I get
That's a
confused
zoning
because
issue anyway, right?
that keeps coming up, and this, what we're proposing here has nothing to do with that, to be completely frank.
But
I
you-
understand the
but you
question,
were-
but
I worry about, you know, like in 2D where it says, you know, this will supersede, you know, anything else that's found anywhere else. And so the problem is in the future, you create a target number of homes that may or may not be close to Hoover, that may or may not have a lot of effect on anything with regards to Hoover. And now, in the future, we've made this targeted group something that there could be additional hurdles, there could be additional issues. And I think it's of concern enough for me that I would definitely want everyone's voice who is affected to be heard.
they have the opportunity. Yeah, no,
I do that with any zoning classification.
Well, no, I mean,
You know,
we're sitting,
the
we're
goal- the
sitting here
goal is to
tonight
make this
and we're,
We just did that tonight, going from rural residential to a planned commercial district.
right, but I think this is significant enough that I think these folks should be notified
Okay.
to
then-
what's going
then
on.
To everybody's point, then let's schedule a time so that it can go out in the township newsletter. And, I mean, we keep, if everybody wants to have more public comment, or at least advertise it, I mean, obviously, we can't round up folks to come into a meeting. If they don't show up, they don't show up, and those that do, great.
And I'd be
It's all right,
satisfied
but
with
if we
that.
offer it and
And
they
I'd
don't
be
show up, that's
satisfied with
fine.
that. And you know what? If
I'm
no one
completely
comes and we
comfortable
send
doing
out
that.
2,000 postcards, I'll be a happy person.
yeah.
That'll be fine with me
Yeah,
because
no,
they've been
Let's pick a
notified.
day. I mean,
we can arrange that. We got the list. I think we're too late to make the newsletter. I think the deadline to make the next newsletter from the communications director is already
Well, if
passed,
this needs
but-
to move fast, if this
I'll
needs to
double
move
check with her,
faster
though.
because of the desire of,
Because if I can get it in there, I'll get it in there.
yeah, if this needs to move faster because of the desire of the board or of this commission, then I think we have to look at.
No, I don't think the board
a mail
set any
source.
kind of
Okay.
strict, hey, we want this done by this time frame.
Okay.
I haven't been told, at least I haven't been told that.
I think this article should be of prominence so that we don't have, you know, 1,000 residents come back later and say, I didn't know about it too.
Yeah, like I said, the deadline may be passed, because this is the November, December newsletter, I think. I don't know exactly when it hits, because I don't do the newsletter, I just get told when I'm supposed to submit an article, and that's like, I get asked for the article like a month plus in advance, so I don't know when it actually is gonna be in the mailbox.
Do we need a motion to table this, or do we
We're gonna continue, is that what we're? not
continue?
table.
Continue, it needs to be
Okay.
a date, time, and place certain. I mean, you could just continue it to one of your future regular meetings, and if you go far enough out, you know, then I technically don't have to re-advertise in the paper. I'll still send the mailers out that have been requested. But if you table it, you're gonna have to have a motion to untable it, then I've gotta re-advertise it, and then, you know, it'll just take longer, but if that's not the commission's concern, then.
so my suggestion would be just continue it to the November meeting, and if something happens where Joe can't get it advertised or letters sent out, then we continue it
Continue it
again.
again. I'm okay
Do
with
you have
that.
anything on the November meeting already or not?
You'll have final development plan application for the Grove. That's now the name of the development that's southeast corner of Big Walnut and Worthington. We did not receive any new rezoning applications, and I don't think we received any other final development plan applications, Mr. Benson. Today was the deadline. So, the only thing you'll have on your agenda is the Grove. This hearing, if you continue it. And we do have a couple other administrative items to discuss if the commission's
So we wanna-
interested.
But we want to do this the next meeting, right? Yeah. Not push it because of the newsletter potential issue. We want to go ahead and.
I have
Do it now.
concern, no,
I want a
think that-
proper
Yeah.
notification
Right.
than just saying
We can do a proper
it's on the
notification
agenda.
as long as it's not in the newsletter.
I just don't know if the deadline might be passed. I don't know where she's at in terms of
You want to do a direct mail?
crafting
Okay
out
with-
the
no,
articles.
I'm okay with that.
But I can do the direct mail. That's not an issue.
How many properties, I mean, there's significant
It's not even-
properties. on
It's
your
well
list.
over 2,000. Now, there might be some overlap there, in terms of, city of multiple properties owned by the same owner. We can probably scrunch that down a little bit.
All right, so what do you need need a week? We need a week to mail that out, right? 2 weeks?
I've never done a mailing of this size. I don't know if I'm gonna have to farm it out or not.
Production on that will probably be more, by the time they proof it and have the mail house get it out, and then you have to understand that they're probably not gonna send it first class, so you've got a window of delivery time.
What we do have, it's not the newsletter and it's not a individual property mailing, so I'm not saying this is a replacement of the individual mailing, is we do have, in lieu of a newsletter, is essentially a digital constant contact email blast we can do, and anyone who's subscribed to that email blast will get it. Now, that doesn't,
think that's
again, I don't
dangerous.
think that replaces the targeted mailing that you're talking about, but it may address the fact that we may not be able to get it into the paper newsletter.
All right, so
in
we're either
time.
talking about November 8th or December 13th.
Pardon me,
We're either talking about November 8th for the next meeting or December 13th.
then I think December 13th would be, I think you need enough time to properly execute.
Mark?
Yeah,
If that's what the commission wants to
I
do.
mean, I think you're the one that's gonna be burdened with this, right? I mean, we're
Yeah,
not gonna be
my
doing it.
staff will take care of it.
Paul's expression is
But I mean,
yes.
you're
I mean,
you're
first of
gonna
all, could we
produce something,
commission
you're
you
gonna-
to expend that kind of,
I don't know,
funds?
do we have that empowerment?
You don't have a budget as set forth by
Right.
the board. So,
actually be requesting the trustees to perform this? Yeah.
And then what if they say no?
And I guess it
Then we
wasn't
would
that
disapprove it.
significant to them, and then we'll be done.
It's up for vote.
It's a notice.
I don't know if I have to, I'm allowed to spend a relatively significant amount of money without having to go to get a board approval. I think the ORC allows me to spend up to $10,000 without board approval, as long as I follow the right financial procedures of writing the purchase order and IRA, having the appropriations in place to do the mailing. We've never done something like this, so it's not something I usually anticipate in the budget. I shouldn't say never, but we haven't in my time done something of this scale, so. I will look into it, and certainly if it's something I can do, I will do it. Whether it requires going to the board, or whether it's just something I can do absent of.
We need to deal with December, not November.
But it's
I
your
would
druthers
absolutely
that we
agree,
do
but-
that, and then I can report back in December, and if I couldn't do it, I mean, I would probably report to you before then, but
Yes.
if
we
it
can
can't
have an
happen, I will let you know as soon as possible.
I think we need an
Of course,
update.
you're gonna advise the trustees of our recommendation tonight and the fact that we wanna do the mailing and that we want to.
I will report back on where things are if they ask. I may have individual conversations with them.
I think,
tell them.
I think you should let them know, Joe. I mean, this is, open, honest, direct, no.
I think they're gonna know when they listen to the audio.
Yeah. Well.
On the other end of the spectrum,
I think
it's,
pretty clear. We're gonna talk. Yeah.
on the other end of the spectrum, it's the township's application, so we do have
Right.
somewhat of a say on how it goes, because it's not like we're dealing with a private applicant and we're saying, oh, we want to send out more mailers. That, I think, would definitely be a different scenario.
I think
but
ultimately,
it's
this
our
really
amendment.
just reduces overall risk in doing this a great deal.
Absolutely.
It'll be a lot of legwork, but I don't have, I think you might, it's gonna generate a lot of calls and emails to my question about what is this, and then they'll read it, and then they'll say, I don't understand any of this. But that's sort of what we're trying to do, right, is
But I would
get
far
inform
rather
people and
have
get
that
those questions,
happen.
And that
complex
was
questions.
just like
so.
my call to you 3 weeks ago. So what is this?
But in all fair
Yeah, I mean, that's
play,
the goal. That's the intention.
So just from a sequence perspective, if we wait till December to have this meeting, it's gonna take us at least that meeting and probably the next one. So we're into January before we would even think about, more than likely, passing any sort of motion on this. Then it goes to the board,
Yeah,
to the board of trustees, okay?
For next year, because 2
It'll be
spots are up.
That's right, so it'll be a different board of trustees, there'll be, and then that
what's
will
their
take at
hearing
least,
requirements?
that will probably take two
It's the same,
Here.
essentially the same as yours.
meetings there. So we're looking at maybe middle, and then it's yes or not, it is or not subject to referendum at that point.
This would be subject to
So
referendum.
this would be subject to referendum, so we have, how many days?
It's 30 days once the board would approve it to file a petition.
Okay, so possibly not even in place until middle of '22 at this point. Okay,
I don't see the point in rushing it through. And I would rather err on the side.
No,
of
I'm not
transparency.
advocating
No,
for that either.
I'm just talking about timing. So
I think it's much safer to have residents involved before something is altered than have residents have a problem with it and we deal with the problem. It's unfortunate you're going to answer a lot of questions. I'm sure you will.
No, that's what we're here for.
But questions give knowledge and, you know.
Now, I mean, what I'll probably do is direct people to say, well, what is this about? And I'll say, here's the link to the document that the commission is considering. You have to sort of read it.
I would add that you should,
Is this going to be posted?
That's a public record. I'll be happy to provide that to people if they ask for it.
So,
frequently
motion
asked
to
questions
continue?
help some people.
Okay. You're good? Okay.
All right?
So I move to continue the public hearing for the subject zoning text map amendment dated September 2nd, 2021, zoning case number 2021-04, commonly known as the Hoover Watershed Overlay District, until December 13th at 7 PM in the Township Hall.
Second.
Mr. Chair, ready for roll? Roll. We'll call Mr. Leff.
Yes.
Mr. Moore. Ms. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Welch.
Yes.
Mr. Antonetts. All right. Let's get that. December, that was 13th, correct? Yep.
What?
December 13th,
December
your regular
13th
meeting on the 13th?
is
Yeah,
what I
we'll
said.
get it on that agenda. Sounds good.
Okay, it's been a long night, but I would like to get at least one review of this proposed zoning commission rules of procedure. I should note the time is 8:41. If anybody had a chance to review this, now is the time to comment. If you have any revisions or questions, clarifications, I did read it. I have found a couple of things I want to address.
Sure.
One is just, I think, a typo. On page 15, it looks like you've repeated, unless I'm reading it wrong, the top paragraph. The first two sentences are repeated.
I'm sorry, which page are we on?
15.
15.
Says the results of the vote on motion pertaining, and then there's another sentence, motions pertaining to items, and then it's repeated. The results of a vote on the motion pertaining to application motions, that looks like that's repeated. Unless there's one word that's
No, I
different.
think, let me look, but I think you're correct.
Hey, we're not finished.
It's like they might be.
I think they are.
The fun stuff's right now.
The chairman requires an audience. Please do not leave.
Mr. Chairman, I think you're correct. I think that's a,
Just double check that. I mean, it doesn't have any significant.
I think that is an unintended duplication.
Okay, then page 14,
Page 14, yep.
under motions, it says, I just want a clarification. Alternates not sitting as a voting member shall be permitted to make or second a motion. Is that true?
There's probably a missing "not" in there.
Alternates not sitting as a voting
Alternates
member
not
shall
sitting as a
not
voting
be
member shall not
permitted.
be permitted.
All right,
Good catch.
then this one really hits home because I just experienced it. This one on page 6.
Yep.
No member of the commission should represent an applicant or applicant on matters upon which the commission is to decide, which I just did.
Well, you recuse
No, you
yourself.
recuse yourself.
Yeah, but you recuse yourself.
It's not what this says.
I know,
That is a
it needs to
statement.
be specific, right?
That is a statement.
Revise the verbiage.
Yeah, the verbiage
It
needs to be.
kind of does. It goes into saying if you do, then you can't participate, which I think we followed all of that.
But you're
that
right, that
first statement
statement-
is pretty clear.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm sorry, I need to.
yeah, you are correct. Good catch on that. Taken out of the context of the paragraph, it says you couldn't.
I'm on page 6, I'm
Do
just
your
trying to
job.
find where that specific
It's
verbiage
the
is.
second, well, the first paragraph.
Oh, okay, I see at the very top. Members of the conflict.
Not the very top, I guess. That's part of the.
No, yeah, I see,
past-
the first full paragraph. I
Yeah,
see what
yeah,
you're talking about. No member of the commission should represent an applicant. I mean, we could just add, unless said member recuses themselves.
Whatever.
Yep.
I mean, you kind of do. as
I
you
use
read
the word-
through it.
It should
And I
be the
use the
same
word
sentence.
should instead of shall, which means it's not a, regulation per se. Plus,
But I think it needs to
even
be in the
if
sentence.
a member went against this, the commission has really no authority whatsoever to censure you or throw you, you did what you did, and
No, but somebody else potentially could.
Yeah, I just.
someone else potentially could say
Yeah.
you violated your own
Parties
rules.
can show conflict of interest.
Yes.
I don't want to jeopardize, then
And
I-
then
That's
you need
why
to meet the
I got out
Bioethics
of the ones
Commission.
I was involved in. I really had anything I would do would be a credit committee or a deposit, but it's just.
I would just want it because then if an applicant asks me to assist, then I would say, no, I can't.
Yeah, no, I understand. As written, that is pretty,
Okay.
it's not what we've been practicing or what we've been doing.
All right, does anybody else have any other,
I've not had a chance to review it.
do we need, oh, you haven't?
I
That's fine.
I glanced, but I did,
They sent it originally.
yeah, I did.
Thought we were talking about it
Yeah,
last time
I
and
glanced,
did not bring my.
I glanced through it, but to tell you, I just reviewed it in the last 48 hours, I did not.
Okay, do we need to take any action on it?
No, this isn't a hearing or anything. You can do with this whatever you want, as long as you want. You don't need to make any motion tonight. It's just a discussion item. So,
We don't have to formally adopt it? We do.
no, you
No?
don't have to do anything tonight. If you want me to make those changes and give the
Yeah.
commission opportunity to review it,
Email it back out to everybody, that
mail
would
it
be
back
lovely.
out completely at your,
That would be the safest way to
Yep.
play.
This is a very informal because it's your document.
Okay.
Past comments have come up about news notification, and it was to the Delaware Gazette and not to other publications or.
That is the recognized paper that meets the standards of the revised code.
Other types of notification that need to be considered at this point, that we.
Well, we do the property signs. I need to be better about doing the email blast again. We were doing that for a while and then it sort of fell off, but that's an avenue to it. All the law says we have to post it on the notice board that people can drive up and look at and run it in the newspaper.
Well, I mean, but we've also got Nextdoor, and Leslie's got that type of, the stuff going there. We've got the Facebook account for those people who still use
Correct.
that. Do we need to specify that we're going to do other types of notification, or do we just stick to the one because that's what they always?
I don't have control over those platforms. The content of the social media platforms is under Leslie's domain, and I know she generally tries to keep that a little more light and friendly because, to be honest, she sees all the clicks and what gets clicked on and what doesn't. None of the dry technical stuff ever gets clicked on. And that's not really, the website
and it
exists for the dry
can
technical
can
stuff.
become
The
a
Facebook
monster.
page is supposed to be about,
So then do we, because of the shift from newspaper notification to, or newspapers in general, but to social media and whatnot, do we need to create our own zoning platform? Do we need to say, hey, we need a Nextdoor account, we need a Facebook account, we need to be able to
I don't
communicate to the people that way?
I don't think there'd be support for that because there's already a feeling that there was too many of those as is and they were trying to pull them together for a unified front. So
Can you ask
we put
Leslie-
it on the website, we put a sign up, we do the newspaper. I will get better about doing the email blast once again, which essentially replace the newspaper and frankly are the ones that get the most reaction. The signs and the email blast are the ones that work. The newspaper, yeah, I agree. That we only do that because the law says I have to. But the signs actually are the most, when people call and say, hey, it's almost always, I saw the sign, what is that about?
That's not going to work here, unless you're going to.
No, not here. No, I'm not gonna put it, no, in the instance of the
We just only
text
do that
amendment.
sign.
but-
You have to put it out on the message board now, okay? And that's gonna stay up for
Yeah.
30 days.
Message board that holds like 5 letters.
Yeah, not many letters, and is not lit. It's
If you live in one of these lot numbers.
You may want to talk. No, I think the email blast would probably be the most helpful too. That's just what everyone's trending towards anyway.
But from a legal perspective, for ORC, we've just got to do the newspaper.
Just the newspaper. Everything else we do is above and beyond the call of duty.
If we chose not to do the newspaper, is there another option?
We absolutely cannot choose to not do the newspaper. That's.
Okay.
So I think it's, yeah.
And the Gazette is the paper, and that question has been asked. Well, is the Gazette, because not everyone gets the Gazette. That's the only paper in this area that
Get it,
meets
may not
the
agree.
ORC's definition, that qualifies.
Has to be the paper of general circulation for the area.
Yes, and I don't think the dispatch counts because it's in a different county.
Understood.
Good, that question's been asked. Well, why don't you use the dispatch? Number one, it's in Franklin
Yeah,
County.
both papers are now owned by companies from out of state. Neither of them are printed or published in the state of Ohio. Isn't that great?
And also the dispatch charges significantly more for their ads.
That's why you can't get Friday night football scores till Sunday.
Well, I do want to go on the record and say this is the most spirited
I like it.
educational
I like it. Spirited
and
discussion,
intellectual,
good hard
this is
questions.
for our trustees, meeting that I've ever been involved in, and I certainly do appreciate it.
Yeah, I think it's, I like the idea. I
And we'll
like the
talk
idea.
about your east side issues over there.
East Sider.
What did he say?
Are you the only East Sider here?
Yeah. Chip don't like no subdivisions.
The only other thing I
Schedule.
had for you was
Meeting
the
schedule.
schedule, yes.
That's fine.
Does anyone have any issues with it? I do prefer a motion, a formal motion.
So moved to approve the schedule
I
presented
second
by
the
Joe.
motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Perfect, that's all I needed. All right.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yes.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second. Aye.
Aye.
The time is 8:51. This concludes this meeting of the Genoa Township Zoning Commission. Thank you all